So this method is problems-based learning. And one thing I think that as you start to unpack the methodology behind problems-based learning, you'll see a lot of similarities and connections with the inquiry method, a lot of the high-engaged, high-level thinking possibilities for students. Certainly as you start looking at the research supporting problems-based learning, it really addresses the authenticity that oftentimes students seek with the problems we're asking them to solve. The old common math question, why do I need to learn this? Certainly problems-based learning is addressing that level of relevance and authenticity. What I'm doing here with this particular recording is introducing you, the student, to how I have taught or at least introduced this concept in the past. Now, similar to inquiry and some of the other methods that we'll be looking at throughout this methods course, is that this is no different regarding the preparation level necessary before students even engage with the problem. I think that's really kind of the component with all these methods is the teacher work is all done before the students even engage with the questions or the problem or the simulation that you're going to introduce to them in the classroom. And to address up front, certainly this is a K through adult methodology, as you'll see just in a few moments when I discuss the slide that you're looking at now as an adult problems-based learning opportunity. But as with any method, there are some that require more teacher guidance. Certainly in the younger grade levels, you want to push students to exploration, but oftentimes you're leading them up to that level of exploration. We'll talk about some possibilities for authentic problems at early elementary grade levels as compared to later elementary grade levels, as compared to middle school to high school, authentic problems that students can resolve. And problems-based learning really requires almost a sequential component when you're teaching this. In other words, there's a lot of humanity. Problems-based learning really allows you to go cross-curricular. It's not isolated to a particular content. So, for instance, environmental. There's a lot of social studies involved in a problems-based environmental question, as there also can be embedded science. You have them writing, so there can be an English language arts component. Certainly, if it's a recycling and there's a quantitative component, you can bring in math calculations. So this problems-based learning, which is why it's extraordinarily popular, but I don't think it's something that's trending. I think it's something that's been around a long time that teachers have been reluctant to include in their curriculum because it can be time-consuming, and to work out all the cross-curricular details, it's going to require a lot of teachers to essentially buy into this being an effective method. And that can be a challenge because you have some who are very confident in their methodology and you have others who are not. So there's some shortcomings, obviously, to all of these methods that we look at in this particular class. In problems-based learning, probably perhaps the biggest shortcoming is the time consumption. So if you, again, to go back to and address the earlier point about preparation, if you don't, and you probably can't think of all the details before you start a problems-based opportunity for students, but I think that's part of the genuineness in this method, is that it unfolds and students really do explore. We talk a lot about in public education about pushing students to higher level thinking. Certainly you can see as we unpack every one of these methods that we're going to introduce, at least in this particular course, that's the point of this methodology. Every one of these methods will push students to higher level engagement and higher level thinking. And once the teacher introduces it and organizes it and moves students through the process, it transitions a lot from teacher-led to student-led, which is exactly what we're hoping to achieve in our classrooms. So using this particular example, if you look at the slide, what I did in order to introduce this to a group of future teachers, or even grad level teachers, we considered something that would be very authentic to a population of teachers, and that is professional development on their campus. Certainly continued professional development is something that at all levels, K through, again, adult learning, is essential. And the key to, if we compare it to our earlier method of inquiry, the essential thing to inquiry is a good question. Now, sometimes that's a teacher design question, sometimes it's a student design or student group design question, and the key to a good problems-based sequence of learning is the authenticity and the context for the problem. So what is the problem, and is it a problem that we really want to find a solution to resolving? And I think, again, this can be a teacher contextualized problem, something that maybe the students haven't thought about, but this is extraordinarily relevant in their lives. For instance, if we look at a maybe later elementary to middle school problem, bullying, it comes to mind. Certainly those are prevalent. Those issues are prevalent on every campus. It could be low socioeconomic, limited resources. And that's the thing about these problems is, they can lap over into a little bit of, I don't want to call it controversy, but when you start to personalize it and you realize, wait a minute, this problem really affects me or my friends or their families, it can get very personal. And I think that rather than that being something removed from learning, I think what we need to be able to do is harness that emotion and compassion and level of intensity and bring it into something that is really constructive. And I think that is perhaps what's been missing in public education. So if we, again, continue to look at this particular example, I am asking a group of future teachers or even current teachers, okay, I want you to develop a professional development sequence. This isn't something that has to be done off campus or brought onto your campus. If we're talking about something that's missing within the context of your campus based on a needs assessment, what is it? How can we address that? Develop a training program. If you look at the fourth bullet, develop a training program that is practical and pragmatic. I think, again, if we think in terms of if you've engaged in any professional development, that is one of the most perhaps most significant concerns is that, well, this isn't even tailored to our campus. Well, if you're tailoring it and you're part of that campus and it's not tailored to your campus, then that's on you. But I can certainly see where we've outsourced some of this professional development for consultants to come in, and those that are being developed do feel that, well, wait a minute, this isn't even relevant to our circumstances. So, and we do that for our students in the classroom as well. We bring in things that are not relevant to their circumstances. One of the things that perhaps is very common and it compromises something like problems-based learning is, and I'm going to use this as an example, this is maybe perhaps a bit of an overgeneralization, but it's true in many cases, is that in elementary grade levels, sometimes the teacher assumes that the student doesn't bring in enough prior knowledge, and that may not be the case. But if they assume that they don't bring in enough prior knowledge, then they stay away from the high-end questions because, they'll just never know the answer to that. You never know what they know until you ask them the tough question. So I would encourage all elementary teachers in all of these methods, but certainly in problems-based learning, to never assume the student doesn't bring in a very enriched background of prior knowledge to where you can ask them the tough questions. Certainly there will be those opportunities where you have to scaffold and bring them up to a level of thinking in order to be able to address that question. But nevertheless, don't ever not ask the tough question because you don't think they're going to be able to get it. And then on the flip side of that, in the secondary classroom, middle to high school, we assume they already bring in that information. And we can just jump right into a really tough question without having to scaffold their thinking and understanding and knowledge base in order to be able to address that. So really it's kind of a flip problem. The elementary teacher assumes they don't have enough information and it needs to all be teacher-led up to that point. And then you've got the secondary, particularly high school teachers that think, oh, well, they should already have that pool of information, so I'm just going to jump into the higher end questions without having to scaffold them up to understanding. So, and I would argue that that happens in college a lot as well, and even grad school, that the professor assumes that, oh, well, you already have a pool of knowledge from which to draw, so I don't have to worry about that. Now, we can close the gap very quickly. Certainly if you're an adult learner as compared to an early elementary, early childhood learner, your thinking capacity can catch up much quicker. But I guess what I'm saying is I'm cautioning you not to make those mistakes. Don't stay away from the critical thinking questions at the elementary because you think they won't get it. And at the high school, don't jump perhaps right into those critical thinking questions assuming they already have it. So again, back to this example, this is an opportunity, and I can obviously, with an adult learner, allow them to explore without a lot of guidance. I give them some parameters. Again, as with the inquiry method, I would probably do this in a group. But again, that depends on the problem, and it also depends on the context of the classroom, the environment of the classroom, your particular presence as a teacher, and allow them to explore how would you develop a professional development sequence, training that would be effective, pragmatic, practical for that particular campus. How would you measure its effectiveness? I think that's hugely missing in a lot of professional development, is the one shot, we're going to meet for 45 minutes, go over this, and just assume you're doing it in your classroom. So there needs to be measuring components. And then when it looks like the trees bearing fruit regarding this professional development, how can we celebrate our successes? I mean, so to consider that, if we look at the next slide, these are in order to help kind of guide again the problem, since I was doing this as an example of problems-based learning and trying to move students a bit more quickly through this learning sequence than I perhaps would have if this were, just a traditional problems-based learning sequence. I pinpointed a specific issue that would perhaps be relevant to professional development on a school campus. So you can look at the different problems, preparing teachers to meet the academic needs of all students, how to reduce the number of dropouts on your campus. Certainly these are problems that are relevant throughout the United States, regardless where you are and regardless of perhaps the grade level sometimes. But in order to obviously channel their thinking, channel their research, channel their focus, I just contextualize the problem for them. That, I would argue, maybe compromises a little bit of the authenticity, particularly if you take away their ability to focus on the problem that they consider significant and relevant to them. But sometimes that's necessary. So if we look at, for instance, some examples of problems, let's say early elementary. Let's say that first and second graders are having an issue cleaning up after themselves in the cafeteria. Well, rather than that become some sort of administrative policy, perhaps the first and second grade classrooms could develop a problems-based learning opportunity to resolve that issue on their own. Certainly talking about responsibility and accountability, those are characteristics that we're trying to instill in students well before latter elementary and middle school. And then looking at middle school, like I said, latter elementary school, bullying, that's a prevalent issue. Maybe even talking about self-confidence. Maybe we see a limited amount of self-confidence among students on a particular campus. So it's really kind of a needs-based opportunity for students to authentically solve problems that are relevant on their campus while embedding all this content. So if you start looking at your grade level TEKS and you start looking at your content level TEKS, there's a lot of opportunity to use problems-based learning to cover an enormous pool of content level TEKS across the curriculum, and having that authentic assessment along with it. So if you read the readings that are associated with this particular weekly module, you'll notice that there are opportunities for authentic assessment. There are opportunities to move students to a very, very deep, high-level, enriched level of thinking. So to summarize this opportunity for problems-based learning, I would suggest that you will immediately see some overlap between the inquiry method and the problems-based method. They're not synonymous, however, as you will see while you unpack the media and readings for this particular week. I would also say, don't dismiss this method as something that can't be used at a very young age, as it can be. But as we go through these methods, you will notice that there's obviously more responsibility for the teacher at a kindergarten, first grade, second grade classroom, and a little less responsibility on teacher-led opportunities once you get into high school. But that's pretty natural because of the level of academic maturity that goes along with human development. So, but again, be cautious of assuming too little or assuming too much, depending on the student population of your classroom. So as you look at this particular example that I'm using to introduce this to a group of future teachers in an adult classroom, you can see that the different bullets that suggest the contextualization of the problem and how to organize their research and their measurement and their design of a system. All of those can be high level, but also extraordinarily relevant and pragmatic to their personal lives. So that's really the key, and that's why I would suggest its popularity is growing, is because all research suggests that, if we really want students to learn, then we give them relevant things to learn, and problems-based learning does that. So as you continue to explore this method and practice this method, you will certainly, run into your pitfalls with time and preparation and some of the same things that any of these methods will encounter. But I think in the long run, as you prepare and as you move students through an opportunity, you'll see that they will be highly engaged in what it is because they want to solve the problem. So I encourage you to experiment with this as much as possible.